Welcome to episode 1 of the Build and Base. We're going to focus on the female Dormidori de Caveras. Now, I've got a commission I've got to get done for a good friend of mine here in North Carolina, Patrick Healy, and we're actually going to be making 2 of these. We're going to do mine and his, but we got to build them first. So each set comes with 2 models. So step 1 is we're going to have to go ahead and get them separated out. Now you'll notice that the clippers that I use to do all my cutting, they are flat bottom clippers. I'm a huge fan of actual hobby clippers. The ones with the flat bottoms allow you to make far more precise cuts. And so we're just going to go ahead and get this guy separated out and get the male put back in the box, and we'll focus just on the female. Now I've sped this up a little bit because nobody wants to sit through this. All I'm doing now, of course, is taking each of the individual pieces out, and that's what I always do, is I go ahead and get all the pieces off the sprue. Again, being very precise in my cutting, paying close attention, trying to get as close as I can. It makes the cleaning up later a lot easier. So let's go ahead and get her completely off. Like most weird miniatures, one figure has got several pieces. Some of these are real small. In fact, for this one special treat is her face and her head are 2 separate pieces, which was a little bit of a challenge. But the bonus and upside of weird miniatures is the detail is incredible. I was very impressed with this sculpt. Now I like to use the Citadel tool to do my scraping. Like most things from Citadel, it's a little overpriced, but you buy it once and it's yours. And now I'm just going through under the light and looking for mold lines. Now one trick with mold lines is obviously they come from the molds where the 2 sides of the mold are connected. So when you find one of the mold lines on a model, you can go through and it's always going to be a straight horizontal or vertical line depending on how you think of it, and I always just scrape towards my thumb, and as I go through each individual piece I find where the mold line is and then just extend it around and get it. I use a combination of the scrape, use my fingernail, but always trying to get it, and that's kind of my initial pass through the model to try to get all the mold lines. But you're also going to find me at different times finding new instances of where there's a mold line, because sometimes the lighting will throw you off. You've also got to get the clippings of the sprue off. So really, I'm cleaning off mold lines right up to the very end when I start building. Next, let's start gluing. Before we put any glue on this model, I'm going to dry fit everything. So I dry fit it. And this does 2 things. One, it makes sure obviously that I've got it put together. There I am scraping another mold line. Make sure things fit together, but also it also could lead to some more cleaning, because if it's not fitting flush, if I'm seeing a huge gap, a lot of times that's a mistake with the cleaning of it. So I like to clean it off. This is by far my favorite glue. It's by Micromark. It's a plastic glue. It's their welder plastic glue. The brush allows you to be pretty precise, but it takes a little bit of practice. What I like about this glue is that it fuses the 2 pieces, whatever 2 pieces you're gluing together, in a way that you just don't get with any other plastic glue. It's called the welder, and it's a good name for it. It really does weld them close. So there's the 2 parts of the bottom of the skirt. Now there's a third part of the skirt, which I really should have done next. And when I did the second one off camera, I did that next. So don't follow the order I'm doing. Right now I'm going to put her body on, which I really, and you'll see it in a little bit moment when I try to slide it in there. I should have put the third part of the skirt together. But now here you can see me again cleaning off the contact point where the sprue was. And you want to get those as clean as you can, because the more precise you are in your cleaning of the model, the better fit you're going to get. And a lot of times, until you're actually doing the dry fitting, you don't really see it. And most dry fits, if they're good enough, they don't even appear to need glue initially. They latch right onto there. And here I'm just pressing down just to make sure I've got a nice clean fit. You can see she stands there just by herself now that I know the fit's good and there's not a whole big gap there. So we put the welder on and then go ahead and get that body attached. Now, because of the nature of this glue, you'll notice I'll press really hard. Sometimes I'll even put a little bit of extra glue in there because that's where the welding happens. It's just the nature of this type of plastic glue. So here is the top half where we have the arm. This is going to go over the shoulders. Again, dry fit first. Make sure the fit's pretty snug. When it looks good, apply your welder. And again, make sure you put enough pressure on there that the two pieces fuse together. Sometimes you have to wait as you're doing gluing because you put so much pressure on it as you press them together. Sometimes you'll break the or the previous one you put on there. So here was the third part of the skirt, and really should have put this on before I put her body on. Not to mention that arm. My mistake. Like I said, when I did the second one off camera, I put this on before I put the body on. It made a big difference so when you're putting yours together, do the first two parts of the skirt like I did, then go ahead and put this piece in. Otherwise it's really tough because that arm comes down and her finger is pointing down and it's fragile. In fact, I almost broke it there. Luckily I didn't. Another tip when you're gluing, try to find as many contact points as you can. Again, that's where the dry fitting is so important, is once you get the dry fit in there, you can see all the different contact points. The more points that are glued together, the sturdier your model is going to be. And so I get her slid in there. It really takes some more muscle power than it should have. Had I done it the correct way, she would have come together a lot easier on this one piece. In fact, at one point a little bit later on, you'll see it falls out because it just wasn't fused as well because I didn't have it as snug as I'd hoped, and I have to re-glue it. I do most of that off camera though. All right, now the head. So we've got the back of her head and then her face. This took some working. There's a lot of scraping that happens off camera as I just try to make sure that the face and the head are nice and snug. And again, you do your first pass on getting everything cleaned up, but sometimes you've got to go back as you're building and you have to scrape things off. It's worth it to take your time here. After we build her, we're going to be doing some gap filling using green stuff, and the better the model fits together as you're building and the time you're putting in now while you're doing the scraping, this time you're going to save later, either with not having to do gap filling, or I know some people don't fill in gaps. And you end up with models that have, obvious creases and gaps when it's built, and that's never as attractive as you'd like it to be. Here I have to be very careful as I press the face onto the back of the head, because obviously I don't want to break her nose or anything like that. Once on there, we look good. Now let's take a look at the legs. These are a little bit of a pain in the rear end to put in there, but their good news is there's a surprisingly number of contact points for both legs on this model, and they go in nice and snug, which ends up being a pretty sturdy model. A lot of times you'll have models that only have one contact point for the legs, and that is the base of your model when you're gaming. So it ends up being an easy thing to break. That's not going to be the case with this lady here. Now here's something you'll see me do. I'll use the scraper tool to really press the leg in. I can't get in there with my fingers as well as I'd like. And this whole, oh, there you go. There's the skirt piece I mentioned falling off. You'll see me, using that to really press to get everything as snug, and I'm looking to make sure I don't have any gaps in there. Here I've put the skirt back on again, and her leg is now in there nice and snug. I got to tell you, the sculpt on this model is incredible. I mean, I'm always, as I'm building a model, I've already started thinking about how I'm going to paint it, where I'm going to start, and this model is going to take some time to paint, but it's going to be worth it because the sculpt on this is gorgeous. When these models were first announced and they put the renders out, I know the male got a lot of attention because it's kind of a unique hat on the male version of this model, but the female model I think is potentially one of the best sculpts I've seen out of Weird Miniatures so far. It's gorgeous. So we're going to go ahead and get the second leg attached. Again, I'm using the scraper tool to really get it in there nice and snug. I'm looking from all different angles to see if there's any gaps. If there is a gap, that means that leg is not where I need it to be. So I keep pressing and wiggling and pushing until I get it a nice tight fit with minimal or no gaps. Remember, less gaps now means less to fill later. Now here, let's see the gap on the skirt has formed, so I'm going to add some more welder and really press that in there. Things I didn't have to do on the second model because I, put that in there at the correct time, that was the third piece that I built, as opposed to having to do it under that arm with the body already there. Okay. Now it's time to do the head and the hair, the two most fiddly pieces on this model. The one tip on the hair is make sure that, you'll notice the hair goes to the back of the head. So it's, to the inner part of that arm. In fact, you can even use that as a second contact point with the neck. And then the hair was the big challenge. You have just the one contact point on the ponytail, but you also have a little bit on the arm. You're not going to see me, but I added welder to the arm as well, so I'm going to leverage the arm and the end of the hair. And I spent a lot of time really trying to get this thing attached the way I liked it, and I couldn't get it perfectly snug as much as I cleaned it. It ended up getting a gap that I have to fill later, and it's such a delicate part of the model that this gap was not easy to fill, and potentially because the hair is going to be black, I could have left it, but I didn't. A little bit later here, when you see me filling gaps, you're going to see me actually fill that gap in the hair, and I'm glad I did. The upside is that the green stuff from the gap fill will also strengthen that piece, which could be really fragile and easy to break while I'm gaming. Okay, now I'm going to build the second one off camera, but she's done. All right, so now let's talk about the bases. Now I use the Sepulchre base stamps. This is the one you're seeing me use here was from the Kickstarter, but they now sell these, and they're made from a slightly different material now than before, but they're phenomenal base stamps. So first, I've got two-part green stuff. We got the yellow part and then the blue part. Here I'm just kind of warming it up and shaping it because obviously I want equal parts blue and yellow, and by putting it into a ball it's kind of easy to make sure that I've got two equal parts. So now let's tear off a piece of the blue. Alright. And then we put them together. So here, I just squish and stretch, and you just keep stretching it and squishing it until it gets that nice, consistent color green throughout the entire model or putty. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to split it in half, and when applying it to the bases have an insert in them. What you're going to want to do is press that down and get it as flat as you can, and try to get it as flush with the beveled edge there. So I'm just pressing down and over, and you'll notice I didn't glue the green stuff to the base. I've very rarely have ever had an issue, but you could. I could have easily added some super glue before I pressed the green stuff down. Now the secret ingredient, Vaseline petroleum jelly. This is going to do two things for us. One, it's going to save us from having fingerprints on the green stuff. So as I'm smoothing, you'll notice I'm using the jelly to smooth out the top. And this gets rid of any of the fingerprints from me pressing down on it. And two, it's going to make releasing from the stamp easy. So I usually take the bottom of a Citadel paint pot and I just press really, really hard. In fact, you see me shaking the desk. And there we go, our first cobblestone base. We'll quickly do the same thing to the second one. And there, the second one is now done. And now it's time to fill some gaps. So you notice first I built the model, then I do the base, and then I fill the gaps. And the reason I do that is it gives the stamp a little time to cure. I'm going to want to put the model on there before it cures, but I also want it to not be completely soft. So by doing the gap filling after I stamp the bases, it gives me a little time to cure on the base. So now I've got two sculpting shaper tools. Looking for gaps. The first big one that I noticed was in the arm there. So now what I'm going to do is pull off a piece and try to get as little as possible. I'm going for just enough. The idea is that when I finish, I just want green stuff in the gap and with minimal green stuff elsewhere on the model. So I roll it into a little ball, get it right as close to there as I can. Then I use a series of a soft tip sculpting tool, a harder tip sculpting tool, and a metal sculpting tool. The soft ones I use to manipulate the green stuff into the gap and to also smooth it out. So if there's a little bit of excess there, I'm going to press it onto, like, say, the arm. You can see me pressing it onto the arm there. And eventually I'm going to use the metal piece, the sculpting tool, to scrape off the excess. So once I've got it pressed in there and I've got it smooth right about where I want it to, I get the metal tool out. This will show my age. This is one of the old Citadel sculpting tools. And I now go in and I scrape off the excess. So the idea is that I just leave green stuff in the gap itself. And it's going to be kind of a back and forth as I work this. The idea is that it should end up being invisible if I get it right. It's time consuming. But again, this is, this is going to make a big difference in how nice your models look. Here's another big seam on where the skirt attaches at the bottom. Now instead of a ball, what I'm going to do is tear off a piece and make it more like a little piece of sausage or a little string of green stuff. And then I'll lay it over that gap. You see me pulling off just on my left finger there, just a tiny little bit. And then we'll go ahead and lay it onto the seam there where the gap is. And then it's going to be the same process as before, where I'm using the different tools to press it into that gap and then smooth out the edges so it becomes invisible. So you're going to see me again working with the three tools, the two soft and hard shapers as well as the metal. Using the metal one mostly to tear off excess green stuff. And we've sped this up just a little bit because I think you kind of get the idea of what I'm doing. The goal at the end is for the gap to be gone, but for me not to have impacted the sculpt itself. You'll notice I had to add a little bit more green stuff because even after I filled the gap and scraped it off, there was still too much of an indent. So again, take your time at this point. I know we can be real anxious to get those models all built and everything, but if you're not filling gaps, it's worth the time to take to do that. Oh, there's another mold line I found on her leg. Like I said, you do your initial pass for the mold lines, but you're going to always keep an eye out for them. It's not uncommon for me to prime the model and start painting and find another one. Okay, so now onto the hair, where the hair connects to the head. This was a real challenge because it's not a huge gap, and I know that some people like to use, liquid epoxy cement, or to use GW's green stuff, liquid green stuff. I've never had huge success with those products. I do it old man style with green stuff, and you do this enough and you get enough practice with it, you get pretty good at it. Again, I use kind of a sausage. I get it over that gap and press it into the gap itself, and then pushing the excess green stuff away. Eventually you'll go through and use all three tools, the hard tip, the soft tip, and then I use the metal to scrape it off, and ended up filling that gap without any problem. The bonus was that green stuff does strengthen the connection between those two pieces, so I feel pretty confident that that's going to stay nice and secure for gaming purposes. All right, off camera, I'm going to go ahead and fill the gaps on the second one and then get them primed. So, boy, that is a beautiful sculpt. In the next video, of course, we're going to go ahead and paint these ladies. And let's go ahead and fill in the second one, and then, oh wait, I'm sorry, we got to attach them to the base, don't we? So here's kind of the process I attach them to the base. I go ahead and place them kind of dry fitting again, almost, onto the base, and decide, okay, if that where I like her, and then I'll press her down a little bit. And what that does is it creates slight indentions in the stamp, in the green stuff. And it ends up creating a nice, secure attachment to the base, because the actual base cures around the model. Now, you don't want to press down too far so that it looks like she's sinking into the ground, but just enough that it's not a flat-on-flat connection, but more of a slight indent. So now I pull her off gently, and I can still see her footprints and where she's going to go back to. And then I really prefer a gel super glue, Loctites gel. I buy these in bulk because I go through super glue a good bit between making scenery as well as building models, attaching them to the bases. But so I've the three contact points. I've got that glue on the model. I find my footprints. And now she's going to be on there strong between the super glue, the three different contact points, and the fact that she's going to be slightly indented into the base itself. I've noticed with plastic models on stamped bases, you don't need pins because this connection between the super glue, everything, okay, there they are. They're on the bases and ready to go. We will prime them. I prime most of my models gray, and then you'll notice I then spray white from top, kind of a zenithal spray on top. This gives me a nice contrast, and the shadows are gray along top that they're white. Thank you so much.